But I really don't have any regrets. I really don't. I've lived exactly how I've wanted to. I've tried my hardest every single time. I didn't win the matches that maybe I should have always won, but I really gave it my all. So that for me is enough.
Hi everyone, welcome back to The Body Serve. I'm James.
I'm Jonathan.
Indian Wells has wrapped. There are a mere few weeks left in the tennis calendar.
Yeah, the season is coming to a close, and by extension, our season coming to a close with haste.
Yes. You know, it was a weird Indian Wells happening in the fall. The conditions were strange. I would say that we both kind of paid like half attention to it.
Don't speak for me.
Oh, well, I paid less attention than I would normally. Which is not that
this
much.
Is your favorite spot on the calendar in March, and turns out it wasn't any different in October.
Right. Exciting for the people who got to go see live tennis in Southern California. For the folks who won, congrats to them.
For Lawanda, Queen of Tennis Twitter, who was everywhere at Indian Wells, even got her own segment on Tennis Channel. Selfie queen.
The fame has expanded beyond tennis Twitter at this point. Players know her. They come up. It's a boon for them to get a selfie with Lawanda and not the other way around.
The Linz tournament is like, hey, are you coming here? We got a ticket for you. And my question is, what kind of ticket? Is it a plane ticket? Is it round trip? Mm-hmm. Or is it a single session ticket?
Are you her manager now?
No, but the audacity of it all to not be specific. A ticket? You realize that she's in California and you're in Austria. Like, it takes some doing in a pandemic to bridge the two.
Wow, you're really just trying to poo-poo a good move, a good deed.
I'm just saying it could be a really nice promo, or it could be a really hollow promo gesture. That's all. So who won?
Well, let's just say first of all that Indian Wells has been kind of a kingmaker over the last few years, or in this case, a queenmaker, in that a few of the people who have won have gone on to win their first major later that year, or have some major results shortly after. The most obvious examples are Naomi Osaka and Bianca Andreescu, both winning Indian Wells, both being really their biggest titles to date, and then winning the US Open the same year.
I also see here in your notes that both Serena and Ivanovic won it the year of their first majors.
Yeah.
Which would have been when, 99 and 2008?
Yeah, Serena winning in 99, beating Steffi Graf, and then winning the US Open in September. Ivanovic winning Indian Wells before her Roland Garros title in 2008.
And one of the very few big spots on Ms. Panetta's Hall of Fame candidacy happened at Indian Wells.
Yeah.
I'm told not anybody could win tournaments, big tournaments and Grand Slams back in her day. Raducanu would never have happened back in her day.
So she says.
That came out this week.
Italians are known for being straight talkers. You kind of know what to expect when you interview Vinci, Panetta, Fognini. Not obviously, this is a major generalization, but those three are big personalities. Panetta, you just wonder from which perch are you asserting that Emma Raducanu wouldn't happen in your day when you winning a slam was a shock. That's not to say that Panetta's road to that major wasn't high quality, because it certainly was. Like, she beat top 10 players.
She also had a creditable career.
Yeah, it felt, I mean, there is definitely some truth in what she's saying, but it did feel a little bit mean-spirited.
Especially since we know that young people achieve greatness in tennis historically and then go on to have careers. Like, that's not a surprising part of it. It becomes more surprising when, say, if Raducanu had been 27 years old and out of the blue, here she comes from the qualies to the top. You know, that's a difference. It just seems so unnecessary to me. But anyway, the point here was that Pennetta won Indian Wells in 2014. And what did she do? Benefited from a certain semifinal loss in 2015 at the US Open of one Ms. Serena Williams. And then...
But the point is, Pennetta winning in 2014 was seen as sort of a crowning achievement of a very good career. It was a late career revival, and her winning the US Open was a shock. But the point I'm trying to make is that Indian Wells success often presages big-time success at other hardcourt majors. And a lot of times it's your first, it's like your jumping off point is winning Indian Wells.
Okay, point well made.
Mm-hmm. So, we're going to talk about men's first, but the reasons I say that is that Paula Badosa is somebody who's been coming up steadily over the past year or so, and she, as much as anyone, is primed for that next big breakthrough.
Mm-hmm. I mean, she started her year on her quarantine soapbox in Australia.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that happened this year.
See, forget, forgive.
Achieve. We were spared the ignominy. Is that the word?
I guess we'll find out.
Of a certain Georgian winning on the men's side.
We came perilously close to another hardcourt title, and the biggest one of his career, from he who must not be named number 2, a gentleman from Georgia, Cam Norrie. The number 21 beat that guy in 3 sets, and it was surprising, but surprising in kind of a WTA kind of way. And I don't mean that to denigrate either tour. It's just that it wasn't like he came out of nowhere. There were results leading up to it, but it was still surprising that he won such a big title.
Isn't it sad that you have to preface that it's not a knock on the WTA? Because that's how that statement is always used.
No, I mean, because somebody's going to say, I'm hating on the WTA, or I'm hating on Cam, or men's tennis in general. So I'm just going to, preempt all those. Norrie's year had been building in a really impressive way, and so I think we and a lot of other people overlooked him for titles of this caliber. But he's been to 6 finals this year. He won in San Diego 2 or 3 weeks ago, won Los Cabos, and then reached the final in Queens, Lyon, and Estoril, and lost to quality opponents in all of those finals: Casper, Berrettini, and Steph.
Also a semifinalist at Delray Beach.
Yes, early in the year. So it's throughout the year he was achieving big things on all surfaces, had wins over Rublev, Thiem, Dimitrov, Shapovalov, etc. Like, the guy was
I love
coming
how you
up.
have Karatsev and Evans listed here, but you have them as etc.
Well, I didn't want to go on and on.
He moves from number 74 in the rankings at the start of the year in January, and he's up to number 16, squarely the British number 1.
Grigor Dimitrov looked for a little while that he was in position to snatch this one. He's come through, and his game has blossomed in tournaments like the ATP Finals, here and there. He has a massive result. Unfortunately, after taking out Medvedev and Orkac, he couldn't do it, losing to Cam Norrie, but it's awesome to see Grigor playing well again.
I got a bit carried away when I saw those 2 results because, Grigor is a fave. Let's be real here, for us, for many of y'all. And he's also had a fair bit of bad luck this year, having to retire at a couple of the slams, injuries coming up at inopportune moments. He's 30 years old now. It feels like he's been around forever, because he has, but this gave hope that maybe all the chapters in his book hadn't been written yet. That maybe there was a plot twist. And you're like, well, damn, this is how it's going to end? But it's something that we deserve, I think. I think it's something he deserves. It's something the ATP does not deserve.
I feel like Grigor, even if you're not attracted to him, because for a lot of folks, myself included, that's a big part of the draw. Even if you're not into Grigor, he just seems like a cool, nice guy.
How many dudes could get wrapped up in between Sharapova and Serena in some kind of black-hearted love affair get written about and alluded to in the pages of Vogue. Was it British Vogue or something like that?
No, it was Rolling Stone.
Rolling Stone. And still be embraced by both camps and just be above it all?
Yeah. He kind of came out the aggrieved party, but he just rose above it. And now he seems to be well liked by both sides.
Mm-hmm. I'm still keeping out hope that he and Miss Venus will light a candle.
Right. A fun fact about this men's tournament, it was a weird tournament from the start. There were a lot of high-profile players missing, but we get to the quarterfinals, and there's still Tsitsipas, Urkac, that guy, AZ, Diego Schwartzman, and every single higher seed lost their match in the quarterfinals.
Mm. Now, you spoke of the original that guy, because there's two that guys. There are those guys in this episode.
Yes.
The German giraffe. Mm-hmm. He lost spectacularly at this tournament. It was poetic. It was... I mean... This dude was up 5-3 in the third set, serving for the match. He hits a second serve ace to give him match point. Just blasted this serve. And so he got a little bit cocky, right? He's like, this is what I've been doing this year, beefing up my second serve, just in general, just not giving a shit. And it's translated to his second serve as well. After he hits that second serve ace, he puts his finger to his lips to tell the crowd to shut up because he got a bit of heckling in that match. Mm-hmm. And what does he do on the very next point? He double falls on match point.
On his match point.
Yeah, he went for another boom blasting second serve, and he double falls it. And that's all she wrote. Taylor Fritz did the job.
Mm-hmm. There were not even that many people there. Like, come on. He was bothered by the home crowd, but Indian Wells wasn't particularly well attended this year. And it's understandable.
Taylor Fritz is a Californian. This is not like Shelby Rogers getting the entirety of the support in Miami. This is Taylor Fritz on his home turf.
Yeah. And whenever that guy plays in Germany, isn't he always screaming, "This is my motherfucking house"?
That Boris Becker and Steffi Graf built. I don't know. Anyway, so we dodged two potential shit show scenarios on the ATP tour this past week.
Yeah, it puts a lot of pressure on these other guys on the ATP that they have to, in tennis Twitter's eyes, play the hero and take out the villain. It's just a very gross, kind of sleazy dynamic that's going on right now.
And you got the impression that Andy Murray really, really wanted to do it against that guy.
Yeah.
And he was cursing himself as he was leaving the court after he lost that match.
Now, on the women's side, Victoria Azarenka had sort of this surprising run out of nowhere, beating Kvitova.
Surprising, you say. More on that. Continue.
Okay. Beating the giant killer Sasnovich, Jessie Pegula, Ostapenko, and she was vying to be the only woman to win Indian Wells 3 times, which is a surprising stat. It's been a women's tournament since 1989. A few people have done it twice. Serena Williams won in 99 and 01. Had she played between 02 and 2014, or
14?
She returned in 2015. She probably would have added another one. But it's an interesting stat that no one's done it 3 times. Mm-hmm. So you were going to criticize me for calling this run surprising?
No, we'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
I'm not ready to drop that hammer just yet.
But the story of the tournament is Paula Badosa's big breakthrough. She's been building up to it throughout the year. She's had a ton of quality wins, beating top 10 players, top 5 players. She's beaten Sabalenka, Barty, Swiatek, Bencic, Rybakina this year. She won her first title this year.
And what does she do at this tournament? She beats Yastremska, who, mind you, she has just completely fallen off the wagon in recent months. Like I all I'm seeing is first round losses from Miss Half Moon. Yastremska, Goff, Krejcikova, Kerber, Jabeur, Azarenka. This is a murderer's row of WTA assassins this year.
Yeah, and of course this is a 1,000 level tournament. You expect a really difficult draw, but this is a tougher draw than a lot of slam runs, to be honest.
And in a lot of ways tougher because, well, I can't even say that because, Lord, this tournament was spread out over 72 days. I feel like it went on forever. It's not that much different than a slam. In that
it feels
regard,
like it lasts as long.
All eyes were on Emma Raducanu at this tournament. It was her first since she won the US Open, winning 10 matches, all in straight sets, from qualifying to Titleist at 18 years old. We'd seen her in the interim grace the cover of magazines, attend galas left, right, and center, sign endorsement deals all over the place. So, I mean, this was a money-making month for Raducanu, and she shows back up on the tennis court in Indian Wells. And I don't know who those folks were who actually had expectations. For a deep run here, it made no sense to me. Like, she had this run, the two tournaments that she's done really well at this year, Wimbledon and the US Open fast courts. This is not that. And you factor in all that she's been through, the grainy, clayey, gritty surface in Indian Wells, the heat. Like, it just didn't make for a winning recipe for me.
Right. And it was only a few weeks from the end of the US Open. She had done galas, photo shoots, everything. There were a lot of things to distract her if she wanted to be distracted. But for tennis observers, I think this was the most predictable result there is.
It's not even necessarily about being distracted. Like, she could show up and lose after putting in like 3 straight weeks of hard practice, and it would still make sense, given the context of this WTA crop and era. You know, like, we preach every week that literally anybody can win any given week, and people go away for spells, come back for spells, have a cute 2-3 week stretch, and then something doesn't quite work out. You know, I'm not surprised by anything on the WTA tour. What would surprise you on the WTA tour?
No.
If Kim Clijsters won Australia, would that surprise you?
That would surprise me.
What else would surprise you?
I don't know. I'll have to think on that.
Okay. The point is, there are not many things that would surprise us on the WTA tour.
And I don't really think it says much about Raducanu's future. There's just such a small sample size of results to go from here. She's currently trying to sort out the coaching thing, which is a little confusing. Not super interested in that, to be honest.
A lot of folks are super interested in that, parsing her words.
I don't know. People have like very strong opinions on it, and I really do not.
Somebody who had a blitzing run to a Grand Slam title, Yelena Ostapenko, she had a good run at Indian Wells. Could she be a template for what possibly we could see with Raducanu? She went through a spell of struggle, and she's seemingly back in the fold, back in the mix, and she's still super young.
Right. She's only 24 years old. She has 4 career titles. She just won Eastbourne in June. I think, Raducanu and her corporate backers would like to foresee a different career for her, but Ostapenko is still very much in the mix.
Which is why, if I'm Emma Raducanu, I'm signing all the contracts right now.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not taking anything for granted. The other big spotlight at this tournament was on Leylah Fernandez, beaten finalist by Raducanu in New York. And she won a few rounds, looked good. She didn't look like she had any letdown from the US Open. Was her spry, angling, redirecting, fist pump to the sky self at Indian Wells.
Mm-hmm. I think she achieved what was expected, right? She had good wins over Cornet and Pavlyuchenkova, so she lost to Shelby Rogers. A lot of people have. Ash Barty did.
One of the stories for me of this tournament on the women's side was Ms. Sasnovich. And you had picked her a few years back when Sabalenka and her had that cute little Fed Cup run. Remember that? And you said, I'm gonna take this result and extrapolate into the following season and pick Miss Sasnovich as my breakout player. Mm-hmm. And it hasn't really happened to date.
No, at the time there were the two Belarusians who were both poised to do big things. Mm-hmm. Sabalenka, the bigger hitter, and she obviously has achieved the number 2 ranking.
At this tournament, she's the one who beat Raducanu 6-2, 6-4, and then she also took out Simona Halep 7-5, 6-4 before losing to Azarenka. Had she beaten Azarenka, she would have beaten 3 consecutive Grand Slam champions before the quarterfinals at this tournament. It's a tough ask in a lot of these WTA draws these days. There are many minefields, a lot of top heads to chop off.
Oh, wow.
It's very Games of Thrones on the WTA these days. Are you ready for me to get into that whole bit about Azarenka and how you were wrong? If you recall in our previous episode, we had talked about the WTA road to Guadalajara and how anybody who was ranked around 30 in the rankings could still conceivably easily qualify for Guadalajara with a good run or a title run at Indian Wells. That there were so many people still in the mix. And who was one of those people? Ranked, I believe, number 30 at the time, Victoria Azarenka. Mm-hmm. You just said that nothing was expected of her. You were surprised. But hey, she was this close to winning the final and getting to, I believe, number 11. And we had Paula Badosa, who was number 19 heading into this tournament, winning the title and getting to number 8.
Yeah. So she could be a lock at this point to qualify.
Sakkari qualified today. I believe she's, the 6th person to qualify so far? Of those 6 so far, 1 likely won't go in Ash Barty. And we had said, well, maybe Naomi will end up qualifying anyway, and she probably won't go either. But at this point, it looks like Naomi just will not qualify, point blank, period.
Right.
So if you're looking to get into this field in Guadalajara, you have to get up to the number 9 spot, which is currently occupied by Ons Jabeur.
This week, Ons became the first Arab woman to enter the official WTA top 10. She's at number 8 in the official rankings. This was off the back of a semifinal performance in Indian Wells. She's number 9 in the race. It's very possible that she'll qualify for the finals. Badosa is at 8. Muguruza is at 7. Muguruza is playing this week in Moscow, trying to solidify her spot. Pavlyuchenkova is someone else to watch, who it is a bit of a long shot, but if she wins Moscow, she could also qualify.
Still a lot of intrigue. 2 to 3 spots still up for grabs on the women's side. I'm not sure what's going on the men's side. That has been outside the scope of my bandwidth to date.
I believe there are only 2 spots left.
And Cam Norrie is up to number 10 in the ATP race, so he's got a shot.
On the women's side, there are 2 more weeks of tennis. We've got the 500 event in Moscow and the 250 in Tenerife this week. And then next week, we've got Transylvania and Courmayeur in Italy, which are both 250s. And there's some 125s sprinkled in. But really, it seems like Moscow is going to be the deal breaker for a lot of folks.
Other ranking news, Roger Federer exits the top 10.
It's been a long time coming.
Some might say it's overdue.
We have seen some complaints from current players who are saying the modified ranking system due to COVID has inhibited their moves up the rankings.
Their growth potential.
Yes, which it has. We know this.
Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest example of that.
Right.
Andreescu was another. She hung around those rankings forever. Kenin as well. But Federer has barely played in the last almost 2 years. Barely played.
Yeah.
And still is at number 11. If I am a lower ranked, I'm honestly, I'm mad. I get that. How could you begrudge somebody for being mad at that?
Right. Well, especially last year, the complaints were unfounded. And even earlier this year, I think they were unfair. But now that we've gone through an entire season, tennis is not back to normal, but it's close. There's a lot of tournaments to play if you're willing to travel during the pandemic. A lot of players are vaccinated. A lot of players who aren't vaccinated really don't care. They're not really that worried. So you're getting almost everybody playing these tournaments.
A bit of history was made the week of Indian Wells with Talon Griekspoor, now number 89th ranked Dutch player, winning his 6th challenger title of the season. And that ties a record held by 4 other people, one of whom achieved this already this year in Benjamin Bonzi, and achieved it recently. This has all happened. These 2 record makers, they're getting to the top of the mountain moment happened since August. They've both of them won essentially 3 challengers in a row, winning 15 matches in 20 days. Bonzi won one in France before the US Open, went to the US Open to qualify, didn't qualify, went back to France, and immediately played back-to-back challengers. The covidation of that, I don't understand.
Well, it tells you that the rankings should be in a different place now because travel is way easier than it was in 2020.
That's a good point. Bonzi is up to number 63. He was able to win all of his challengers in France. Griekspoor, he did his stretch of 15 matches in 20 days, starting in Murcia in Spain, and then winning both Napoli challengers in Italy. Napoli 1 and Napoli 2. I have the 3 other players who have done this, won 6 challenges in a year. Did you know any of those 3?
No, this isn't a quiz. So, I know who they are.
You've heard of them
but
before.
I wouldn't be able to guess it.
The other 3 are Unicela Naui, Juan Ignacio Chela, and Facundo Bagnis. We've talked on previous episodes, recent episodes, that one of the stories that will get a lot of burn toward the end of the year and to start the year is Novak Djokovic's vaccination status and how that plays with his ability to play in Australia, depending on what the vaccine mandate situation is in Victoria, and possibly on a federal level in Australia.
Yes.
There's been movement on that this week.
The Australian media does like to use Djokovic as the poster child for the anti-vax movement or the vaccine skeptics in tennis, but he is a many times champion in Australia. He's the number 1 player. Obviously, this is newsworthy. Before there was movement in Australia, Djokovic was interviewed by Blik, a Serbian newspaper, about his vaccine status, and he said, kind of indignantly, "I still don't know if I will go to Melbourne. I will not reveal my status, whether I've been vaccinated or not. It is a private matter and an inappropriate inquiry." And he went on to say that in his country, basically, this is private medical information, and the person who asks could be charged, which I feel like is maybe... You know what? I'm not going to say anything because I don't know the law there, but it would be surprising to me. He said, "People go too far these days in taking the liberty to ask questions and judge a person. Whatever you say, yes, no, maybe, I'm thinking about it, they will take advantage." So, do I think Novak will get vaccinated if it's required in Melbourne? Yes. Like, if it means he cannot go to Australia, I think he'll do it. We've seen many, many times, I don't know if I'm going to play Wimbledon, I don't know if I'm going to go to the Olympics. He likes to do this. He's going.
There's also this idea circulating with a lot of players. I saw Daniil Medvedev hint at it today in his statements, that it'll be a situation of just avoiding the hard quarantine like last time, which I don't think that that's going to be the case in Australia next year. It's seeming to me that it's either you're vaccinated and you can enter the country or you're not.
Yes. Since that interview with Djokovic was published, a few days later, Alex Hawke, who is the immigration minister for Australia, confirmed that all visitors to Australia must be fully vaccinated. And it appears that there will be no accommodations like a strict 2-week quarantine, no exceptions for pro athletes. And at this point, it appears that all tennis players coming to the Australian Open do have to be fully vaccinated. They don't have the option of staying in a hotel quarantine instead. Now, we said in our last episode, I think a lot of the vaccine hesitancy on the tennis tours is not deeply ideological. I think for most players, they saw it as an inconvenience. Maybe they were a little mistrustful of
A logistical inconvenience.
a logistical thing. There are a lot of cultural issues at play here. But when it comes down to it, a lot of the people who've been the biggest skeptics have said, yeah, I'm going to get it. Andrei Rublev said he's going to get it. Tsitsipas said, I will play under the conditions that have been set now. I think it's fair. And again, it reinforces this idea that they'll do it if it's mandatory. Like that belief or mistrust in vaccines wasn't all that deeply held for most of the players.
And if it is, let's say it is, how much are your moral beliefs worth to you? What monetary value will you put on that? Is it worth $70,000 for a first round loss minimum? Is it worth a cute little round of 16, couple $100,000? What are you willing to sacrifice monetarily to not be vaccinated?
Right. And for someone like Djokovic, is it worth not changing history? Right? Because when he plays tennis, he's playing in these lofty, everything I do from now on has the potential to make tennis history, to make sporting history. Mm-hmm. Are you willing to give that up? I don't think he is.
In John Wortham's most recent mailbag, the point was made that with the comparison between Kyrie Irving and what he's been doing in the NBA and Novak Djokovic, you could make the argument that Djokovic has so much more to lose than Kyrie Irving.
He sure does. Novak does not have a union behind him. Novak is an independent contractor. And, I mean, Kyrie was already a flat earther. I mean, to be fair, Novak had already had some alarming scientific and medical opinions.
Magic drops.
Neither player's vaccine stance is all that surprising, but Kyrie Irving is one star in a league full of stars, and Novak Djokovic is he's the superstar. He's possibly the GOAT. It's a big deal.
Mm-hmm. And it's also not just Kyrie Irving versus the association. It's Novak Djokovic versus a government.
Right. I think Novak is ultra sensitive to this stuff now, ever since he did that Insta Live with Dr. Quack, whatever his name is, Dr. Phil, about the healing water, and he took a lot of flack, and people made fun of him, and we did too.
Dr. Drew.
And it was earned, but he is definitely, I think he's resistant to that kind of criticism, that kind of questioning, even more so now because of that.
This false equivalency of damned if you do, damned if you don't doesn't play for me, because you come out here and you say, yes, I'm vaccinated, I'm going to Australia. Who are you pissing off?
Right. Most people would just forget it. There's a small percentage of people who will hate you regardless, but for most people, us included, you, I know you probably think we're haters, but Djokovic getting vaccinated is a victory for all of us.
I mean, but keep in mind, we are the pro-vaccine podcast.
We are. The evangelical, basically.
We're going to have to call out for some more 5-star reviews from the UK, because another 1-star has popped up, and the title of it is Pro-Vaccine Podcast. What do you do with that?
It's like, yeah, correct.
Move on.
I don't... It's like when someone reviews a restaurant and they're like, my Uber Eats driver took too long to get here. Okay, well, I will disregard this review. Thank you. On to the next one. The whole thing is frustrating, and I'm tired of it because for all the ranting we do and all the moralizing, there's no way that people's minds get changed by shaming them or exposing them. It doesn't work, right?
They just double down.
It's frustrating, but we're at this point in the pandemic where everybody is angry at everybody, and I'm really tired of being angry at people for things they do or don't do.
Yes, I'm tired of being angry. I'm just hesitant to engage in any kind of dialogue, proactively or by omission, by abstaining, that gives credence to these positions.
Right. And there is like this disease of balance in our political culture where there are two sides to an issue and both are equally valid. This is demonstrably not true in almost every issue there is, but this is how we learned. This is what we learned in school.
Somebody who's gotten a lot of media play this year, in part due to his improved play, probably in greater part due to his increasingly loud mouth, is Reilly Opelka.
Reilly contains multitudes. Right? He's into fashion, he's into art, he's into Venus Williams, he's into John Isner, and his brand these days is straight talker, truth teller.
His brand is straight man talking. That's what his brand is. It is, I have opinions, listen to me, and I don't give a shit what you say. There are only so many times when you can say, I don't give a shit what you say, without us not believing that.
Yes.
Because historically speaking, when you say that...
Maybe you care a little.
Just a little.
Bill Simons did an interview with Reilly recently that got a lot of play on social media. And as you said, he said several times, I don't care what people say. I don't give a shit what you say. Like, okay, like, we got it. Okay, thank you. Just tell us your opinion. I think maybe now, because I'm older, I'm more wary of people who say, well, I just tell it like it is. And because I lived through the Trump era, I think it's warranted to be skeptical of people who say, oh, I just tell the truth. Like, okay, cool.
You tell your truth.
Okay, thanks.
You don't tell the truth. You tell a truth.
Yeah, and there is interesting stuff buried in this interview, but it was like, the way that Reilly comes off is that if you object, set up this sort of opposition, right? If you're saying, oh, I disagree with what Reilly says about the media, then you're this old fuddy-duddy, or you have skin in the game, right? It's almost like there's no way to reasonably criticize what he's saying without coming off like the man, like the institution.
So what did he say this time?
Well, he said multiple times in the past that tennis media is horrible. So Simons says, you said the tennis media sucks. And Reilly replies, these guys are terrible. There's some bad journalists. You have some guys that just criticize. They look to be super negative. Guys that know nothing about tennis. I think we have the worst media of any sport, quite frankly. There are certainly those people out there. Like, there are some truths in what Reilly is saying. Simons, to his credit, does try to moderate and dig each time Reilly says something like that. It's like, what, you think all of the journalists are useless? You don't see them working their ass off overnight to file stories, and he does get Opelka to sort of walk back a little bit, but he's definitely someone who's prone to these big, like, strident remarks. Yeah.
Simon says, do you think there are reporters who do have an understanding, who work hard to tell the story of the game and bring personalities alive? Reilly says, I'm sure there are, but none of the ones that interview me or none of the ones that I've done pressers with. Not one?
None.
Zero. I'm in the finals of Toronto and these guys are asking me, what's wrong with American tennis? Why aren't there any American players in the top 30? The same in Rome. I'm in the semis and they're finding the negative. I'm 23 and playing Rafa. Things are quite all right. I'm in the finals of Toronto and we're going to talk about how Americans don't win slams?
Right, and he's got a point there. Those questions are very annoying, and you hear them repeatedly. I think there's just a bit of exaggeration going on.
Right, but by the same token that you're wanting to lambast this search for the next great American. Why aren't there Americans in the top 30? Why isn't an American winning slams? You're also benefiting from it. You're benefiting from the added attention of being an American in a Western-focused media setting. Tennis is already niche in its reporting and its coverage, and you have that built in
Right.
as an American.
So you have a platform that players from other countries might not have. You probably have access to wild cards. And Reilly is not like the institution. You know, he's not somebody...
He's not a Harrison or a Saw.
Exactly. So I want to be fair there. But there are definite privileges to being American or Anglo or Western European in the tennis world.
To me,
right?
it speaks to a lot of thin skin.
Right. It was funny to me that he's talking to a tennis journalist and he's basically saying, like, all of you guys absolutely suck. But I thought there were some nuggets about, like, why do you need this generation of Americans to be Sampras and Agassi when, first of all, Roddick and Blank weren't Sampras and Agassi? And listen, like, it's not going to happen. So enjoy what you have, which I appreciate.
I don't think he's saying it's not going to happen.
Well, he kind of is.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. He's even saying, like, the younger crop, Korda and Brooksby, are far more likely to be slam winners than his mini generation. Mm-hmm. He said that. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. Reilly could break through, Fritz could in a big way, but I guess I appreciate the realism. Like, you could also just appreciate what you have in the current generation of Americans. What I don't like is this opposition of, like, player versus journalist, because it sort of assumes that journalists have power that I don't know that they do practically. Of course, reporters have the power to agenda set. They have the power to, in some ways, shape the way that people see players. But at the same time, a lot of reporters are freelance. The jobs are drying up. It's very expensive to travel. Covering tennis is more and more difficult constantly. So the people you're talking about are not the privileged newspaper crop for the most part. Their people, if they work in newspapers, are probably fighting with their editors to get funding to travel. A lot of the people don't even have a cushy newspaper job. They might be paying their own way. They're filing stories constantly to be able to afford the travel. Like, there's this weird privilege gap that I don't know that he fully appreciates.
I'm just wary when people say, y'all are just here criticizing.
Well, that's the other thing, right? A journalist, even a sports journalist, their job is not merely to celebrate.
Moving past Opelka and further into this relationship between player and tennis journalist, there was a letter issued by the British Tennis Journalists Association, the BJTA. I did not know that this existed. Did you?
No. And I saw the headline and I said, thanks, love. I'm good.
But you have since
forced me to read
it because it's on the agenda. It's a letter to the ATP and WTA tours dated October 2021. Do you want me to read the whole thing or just summarize?
No. Tell me the broad strokes.
Okay. Essentially, they want the Zoom era of post-match pressers and pre-tournament interviews to end. They do not see a reason why, given that most tournaments are played in warm climates, that even in this COVID era, we can't have outdoor interview settings. Mm-hmm. Maybe a little bit tricky during the indoor season. That might not quite work.
Sure.
But what we've seen recently is journalists showing up on site, and they're in their press room where they normally are, but they're still dialing into Zoom calls on the same site.
They cited an example like the Ryder Cup, where they had open air press conferences done safely and where journalists could still access the players. Tennis is lagging behind in this area, in their view.
They say it almost goes without saying that the present system favors reporting from home and has the danger of encouraging editors to believe they can cover tennis without sending anyone to events. I understand this because this was already a concern before the pandemic. The cost of traveling to tournaments was already proving prohibitive for many freelancers, and even those of us lucky enough to be in a staff job have had to work increasingly hard in recent years to convince editors to authorize trips abroad. Makes perfect sense.
Right. One of the other main points is that the Journalist Association feels that the lack of access to players will negatively affect their coverage and will eventually prevent them from building relationships with players.
They also say that now at tennis tournaments, we have fans back on site. We have players now allowed out and about at most tournaments. Fans able to move freely around the concourses and interact with players, and members of the media required to be fully vaccinated at many events. It feels as if press conferences and other media interactions are lagging behind. That was to your point before about how tennis is behind in this regard.
Mm-hmm. It may give the signal to journalists that tournaments don't really value what they do, which is very possible, that they're kind of an afterthought, or if there's an opportunity to save money or save the headache of administration, that they simply don't need to have an in-person press room and press conferences.
Can I just say, too, my impression from being in press conferences, and I don't know if this has been the case with you, is that there's often an overarching feeling, and that's because the ATP and the WTA are so involved in these things. They have representatives at every press conference that one of their players is at, that the net goal is to make sure that nothing too calamitous comes out of these press conferences, rather than getting coverage out of the player and the sport.
Yeah.
Do you get that?
I do.
I know, say, if Kyrie Irving is being interviewed, the NBA cares if Kyrie is going to be causing a shitstorm that they're going to have to deal with. But
you've got heavy hitters from the Times, from the LA Times,
that's just what you have to deal with, right? Like, you don't have any control over that. But it's not necessarily the most neutral setting, I would say, from my experience.
Right. It is moderated by a tour comms person. You always feel that presence. And so that's part of the reason I think a lot of this feels like these conferences just go by rote.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's going to happen.
You also have, in some instances, Isha Price showing up to a Serena Williams press conference, and she's looking around the room.
Right.
It's like, well, what's going on here? Am I looking out for whether I'm getting that look from the WTA person? Am I looking for the look I'm getting from Serena? Am I looking for Isha's look? Like,
to be a good reporter, you have to have guts. You have to have the audacity. This is why I didn't decide to be a journalist, because I can't do that. I can't deal with that feeling of making people uncomfortable or mad, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying, in tennis, it seems to me there are more stifled layers for journalists than there are in other sports.
So I think this letter brings up a lot of points about why access is important in sports writing, but I think it misses because Naomi Osaka and some other players this year gave the press and tournaments an opportunity to rethink how we do press, right? And I don't know what that looks like. Like, I'm trying to think of solutions here, but I don't know exactly what it looks like, what players want, what will give us good reporting, good journalism. I know that it probably doesn't look like the traditional press conference. So I think that's a gap in the thinking here.
Mm-hmm. What's also something that stood out to me in this letter, and I was reading it and I was like, okay, makes sense. Yeah, I see your point. Lots to talk about there, but we're heading in the right direction. And at the end of this letter, to tack on to what you were just saying about the opportunities Naomi Osaka has afforded everybody in tennis this year with press conferences, these folks had the gall and the audacity, the program in which we're recording this podcast, to end their letter by saying many players would be comfortable with the old-fashioned approach. Okay, they're saying in person, most players would be okay with that. In the next sentence, quote, as Naomi Osaka told us at the US Open, it's really off-putting just to be seated in front of a screen. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I feel like a lot of nerves, but it feels much better to be talking to a human. I almost wanted to throw my phone. Like, I was beside myself. Like, who thought of this?
Well, because the way it's written implies that Naomi Osaka is one of the players who would prefer the traditional approach.
And she has said point blank, period,
explicitly
that she doesn't.
explicitly. There's no confusion about
Right.
that. It also gives the impression that Naomi Osaka is co-signing, right? Like she's in agreement with us.
I said a few moments ago that to be a reporter, you have to have the audacity. So clearly.
Reform is in order. Changes are needed. These British journalists are right in many regards, saying that at some point, maybe it's past due, maybe it's in time for the end of the season, maybe it's needed by Australia. We're all required to be vaccinated. We need to get back to how things were, because there is merit in that it's hurting their work product. I've been on some of those virtual Zoom calls. It's not the same.
No. And it also affords fewer opportunities to newcomers.
Yeah, it one of the biggest detriments is follow-up questions.
Yeah.
You get in your queue on the Zoom in the moderator chat, and you're not quite sure when you're going to be called on most times, and then you're called on, and then you can reasonably expect sometimes to get 2 questions. But if the person asks something that you want to follow up on, you're already muted.
Yeah.
So you can't, and then you have to get back in line. You can't give non-verbal cues to the moderator as you would in person. To maybe put your hand up and like put your index finger up and be like, one more question, please. I got to follow up. There's an inorganicness to the Zoom press
So
conferences.
it's even more unnatural than the normal press conference. I'm sure there are a lot of players who prefer this. Like, it's easier. They can sit in front of a screen. It's definitely less intimidating. But here we are.
Yeah, I mean, just don't do that at the end of that letter. Just let's not.
We have a holdover question from our previous mailbag. James McGuirk has posed this question several times now, so we really need to answer it.
Mm-hmm. We apologize, James, your namesake. We weren't quite sure how to tackle it the first time it was posed, and then the follow-up made it so much easier for us to access it. James also, like me, one of his first tennis memories is watching the 1994 Wimbledon final with Conchita.
Wow. I was in diapers back then.
Huh. That is a really delayed 9-year-old.
Shut up. Excuse me. I would prefer to be vague about my age.
James says, I think a more interesting discussion for your podcast would be who decides which tournaments a player plays. Is it the player, their coach, their agent, or anyone else? And what are the factors in their choices? Do they prioritize prize money and ranking points, appearance fees, sponsorship considerations, wider goals around the player's growth and development, or anything else? Are there any interesting case studies in recent years of players who had interesting /good/bad tournament selection strategies that you think are worth discussing on the pod? And previously, James had used the example of Aranska Rus as somebody who plays on a lower level consistently, as opposed to somebody who maybe tries to qualify for what would have been premier events, now masters events, etc.
This is a great question. There are a lot of aspects to it, and I think it would require actually speaking to players and probably, as James pointed out later, retired players who have a bit more freedom to speak without all those other obligations, coaching and sponsors and all that.
There are a lot of answers to these that we don't have. But we can make the comparison with Taylor Townsend a few years ago, who repeatedly in the spring of her seasons did not travel to Europe. She played in America leading up to the French Open at ITF events. Aranska Rus this year, she's won 3 ITF finals and lost in a final of another. She's made the final of WTA 125. She's played a bunch of 250s. The majority of her success has come on clay. All those ITF tournaments were on clay. And she's up to a career high number 61 as a 30-year-old. So that's been her strategy. And it's been working out for her. Not dissimilar to Taylor in that that's about the crest of Taylor's career ranking-wise. I believe in the 60s or thereabouts.
Taylor was starting to have big breakout runs, like right before the pandemic and right before she became pregnant and had her child. But Taylor was getting criticized for not playing these big events constantly or having sort of a weak schedule. And she explained, like, listen, the money is not there. We are self-funded as independent contractors. If I can get points and money by playing in these tournaments, that's what I'm going to do. Like, that's how I'm planning my life.
She wasn't going to go start at one of these bigger tournaments in the spring, try to qualify, potentially lose, try to qualify again, lose again, and not make any money.
And you just mentioned that Bonzi won a challenger in Europe, flew over to New York.
France, went to New York, back to France.
To try to qualify for the US Open, back to France. That costs money. Like, all of this costs money.
Whereas Talon Griekspoor plays in Spain, flies to Italy for 2 tournaments in Napoli. We did that exact flight, pretty much. It's not that much. It's totally different.
Yeah, I mean, you know they're flying commercial. He might be on Ryanair.
It's totally different from flying across the Atlantic. So that is definitely a consideration, I think.
The sponsorship angle is interesting because people with the big agencies like IMG, it's much easier for them to get wildcards to certain events. So definitely those events will be just penciled into their calendar, probably assuming they'll either qualify or get a wild card.
One of the players who had a lot to say about this rankings freeze is Holger. He took to his Instagram page after going through his homophobic scandal earlier in this year to be loud again, rightfully decrying the rankings freeze, but also, I guess, blind to his own privilege in the number of wildcards that he's been benefiting from that his countrywoman Clara Towson did not, and so many other men on the ATP have not had.
Yeah, because he leaned very firmly on the unfairness aspect, and it's another example of you're making some good points here, but you're also missing something. But I mean, who are we? Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You did make a point.
Okay. That is
I'm entering a new era.
That's a frightfully optimistic view from you.
I'm entering my understanding era. My escape era.
10, 10, 2, 1.
What is that?
Like, what is it? Like
B-Day?
9482?
9481.
9481?
Is B-Day. Yeah. This is my new era. But this is a great prompt that I hope other people don't steal, because it would be interesting to ask actual current and retired players this question. Because I'd like to know more about how they build
Are you
their
going to do
schedule.
it? Are you going to ask them?
Yeah. Why not?
I'd like to see that impetus from you going forward in 2022.
All right.
Thank you, James.
Not me, other James.
Thank both of you.
We have revived the dramatic reading segment of the Body Serve for an important event.
A very short revival.
Brevity is the soul of wit. Serena Williams answered a question on Instagram Live recently. Someone asked her thoughts on Maria Sharapova, and she said,
"What about her? I got a chance to hang out with her at Met Gala. She's fun. We talked, we clicked, we laughed. We talked about tennis. And it was really, really fun. And I loved it."
You did not just say tennis.
I did. That's how she pronounces tennis. Is it not?
It is. We know Ms. Serena Jamaica Williams is a known liar.
Listen, you and the army are doing the most with this whole thing. Yes, Serena Williams has lied multitudinously in the past. I believe her in this moment. We have corroboration from Venus. Do you think they conspired
Okay.
to push this Sharapova narrative? She also didn't have to answer that. Nobody is seeing the questions that are showing up in her IG Live DMs.
Okay,
Right?
Lisa Barlow. I believe her.
Oh my God. Don't you dare compare me to Lisa Barlow.
For those of you who don't know, Lisa Barlow is a character, I guess, on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, who is becoming the villain this season.
Talk about a known liar.
Exactly. No, the Serena thing made me laugh because it was very flowery, very... I loved it.
She's
It just made
fun.
It made me chuckle.
They love fashion. They both love fashion. They're at this big fashion event.
And you know what? Little people like us do not understand what it's like to be either of them. So maybe they're besties now. I don't know.
Maybe Caroline gave her a talking to.
Caroline's hair
Yes.
was at the Knicks game yesterday.
We were watching the Knicks opener because I'm a Knicks fan. And they're showing all these celebs in the seats. Spike Lee in his...
What would you call that? I mean,
a
that's
houndstooth jacket suit with
I feel like he was
orange satchel and orange glasses.
Yeah, he was dressed like Grace Coddington. You know who she is?
I do not.
She's like the former like creative director of Vogue. She's a very distinctive look.
Don't know.
Okay.
But the camera pans to David Lee, and there we see in the corner of the shot are Caroline's tresses, her golden locks waving at us.
Attached to who we believe was Caroline Wozniacki. But unfortunately, the network didn't think she was famous enough to show.
Well, David Lee was only famous there because he is a former Knick.
Right.
A much beloved former Knick.
We did have to see Igloo Australia a lot of times.
I was not aware that she was still in the talk.
Apparently, she did the halftime show.
Oh. Well,
Does the NBA have a halftime show? It's more like where they bring out like the local high school's step team, for example.
I mean, basketball at the Mecca at MSG is a totally different experience than from most other places.
Okay.
You've been to
Then
the ACC.
the Scotiabank Arena in Toronto.
Yeah. Oh, it's now the Scotiabank.
Yeah.
Who can keep track?
Quickly, let's talk about the Hall of Fame nominees. This is always fodder for tennis Twitter to go off for a few days. And listen, this is the result of having Hall of Fame nominations every single year. Tennis is a young sport. It's only been professionalized since 1968. Over the next few years, with the big four dominating the Grand Slams, we're going to run out of quality. And this is not to criticize...
on the men's side.
Yes. But between Serena and Venus, there was a lot of domination of the majors as well, and Justine. So this is not to criticize the careers of the folks who have been nominated, but you do have to wonder, like, what is the purpose of a Hall of Fame? Are you nominating people because you have to, or because they contributed in such a historic, important way?
Ultimately, it doesn't really mean anything. Everybody knows who the really, really great players are.
Right.
Is anybody going to go to Newport and be confused that Flavia Pennetta is in the Hall of Fame?
Or isn't? Or what?
You know,
right,
like it'll be a cute little museum tour moment where you read the plaque, you see a nice little garment, maybe a racket, and you read about what Miss Pennetta did.
Yeah.
And then you keep it moving. And then, you know, you go look at like the 5-wall mural celebration of the Williams sisters, you know?
Right. And Billie Jean King and Rod Laver. And so the nominees this year are Flavia, Ana Ivanovic, Carlos Moya, Cara Black, and Lisa Raymond. And Juan Carlos Ferrero.
Lisa Raymond and Juan Carlos Ferrero are both what they called holdovers from previous years, having not been nominated prior.
Which is interesting because, in my view, Lisa and Cara are the most qualified of anyone nominated. Now, there isn't a distinct doubles wing in the Tennis Hall of Fame, but if there were, Lisa Raymond and Cara Black would surely be in it.
But remember, mixed doubles doesn't count. We don't know why it's still a thing. We don't know why they get paid. That money should go to other people.
That's not us. That is Reilly Opelka. But Lisa Raymond won 6 majors in women's doubles, 5 mixed. Cara Black won 10 majors overall, split across women's doubles and mixed. Lisa played for 25 years. She won 79 titles overall. So if you value doubles, obviously she's a Hall of Famer.
If you value longevity, it doesn't always have to be, I'm reminded of Dorian Corey. Like, if you shoot an arrow and it reaches the stars, hooray for you, or something like that.
But there's beauty in just getting through.
Yes.
So something like that.
That's the tenor
Yeah.
of it.
But I mean,
Like, you have great accomplishments. You may not have been the best, but what you did over such a long time, being relevant over such a long time, is still an achievement of itself. I think we are possibly moving to an era where we find value in a more varied number of ways than we have in the past. And like you said, because there's going to be such a paucity of high achievers in future Hall of Fame classes, maybe that will happen out of necessity. What are you going to have, like a few years where nobody is nominated, where nobody is inducted?
I mean, the Hall of Fame has already set the precedent that one major gets you in. So Flavia, one major, one Indian
singles
Wells,
major,
and one doubles major.
No, I'm saying you said the
Oh, sorry. One singles major gets you in.
yes.
If you're a high achiever in doubles, the threshold is much higher. For Flavia, she won an Indian Wells title, a U.S. Open title. I think she has 11 altogether. Carlos Moya, to me, on the single side, is kind of the best bet. The best candidate, having been number one, winning Roland Garros, winning 20 titles altogether, including 3 Masters titles. But Ferrero and Ivanovic are kind of on that level as well. And so I guess part of the criteria has to be what kind of impact these players have on the sport. Ivanovic was a brief number one, Roland Garros champion. She made a few other major finals, but her career didn't take the course that people expected it to after she reached number one. But is she a transformational figure for Balkan tennis? Like, is that something that the Hall of Fame wants to honor? And if so, Ivanovic is an easy choice.
It's clear there's a lot of vagueness when it comes to criteria.
Yes.
And I'm honest, I just don't even really care. Why am I a gatekeeper of who a tennis Hall of Famer is? Like, it's,
Right.
Tommy Robredo announced his retirement recently. Tommy, part of that Spanish Armada
Yep.
of the mid-2000s that really came to prominence. Of course, the head honcho, Mr. Nadal, is still playing, but he was from like maybe that earlier class that kind of matured along with the Ferreros. I guess that was 2002, 2003 with Ferrero.
Ferrer, Nicolas Almagro, Lopez.
Robredo reached his career high of number 5 in 2006, won 12 ATP titles, making 23 finals, 12 and 11 in those finals. 10 of those 11 titles came on clay. His other title came on indoor hard court in Metz in 2007. He's a 7-time Slam quarterfinalist. Not surprisingly, 5 of those happened at the French Open, but also he made the quarterfinals at the Australian Open and the US Open. He was not just a one-trick pony. He also had a Masters title in Hamburg when it was a Masters event in 2006, also winning doubles at the Masters level with Nadal in Monte Carlo in 2008. That'll make for an interesting trivia question for somebody somewhere around the world at some point.
I always liked Tommy Robredo. He's 39 now. He wasn't afraid to play at any level. Right when he was in his mid-30s, he was trying to rebuild and playing on the challenger level. I always enjoyed watching him play.
He was also the guy who gave Andy Murray the middle finger at net after they played one of those almighty 3-set matches. Not dissimilar to what Andy played against Francis Tiafoe this week in Antwerp.
So you remember those 2 little girls in Italy who were playing tennis on the roof last year during lockdown?
Panetta and Vinci.
Vittoria e Carola in northern Italy, and then Roger Federer surprised them by showing up on the roof. Well, Roger has gotten both girls a week at his husband's Rafa Nadal Academy in Monaco.
He promised them that he was going to do it, and he's made that wish come true.
Yeah.
That pretty much brings us to the end of this episode. We will be launching our GoFundMe sometime in November, right? Sometime around there?
Yeah, later, sometime.
Yeah. This is episode 243 of The Body Serve. We are approaching a big milestone on this podcast. Do you know what that is?
I do. We're very close to 500,000 downloads.
That's it's crazy to me. Like the entire year, I've been doing the math on like how many episodes will we realistically release before the end of the year, and will we be able to hit that by the end of the year? And I think it's safe to say we will hit that by episode 245. I think.
Okay,
it'll happen.
Okay, cool.
We'll be a $500,000. If only those were dollars.
Jonathan recently launched mouse pads on our Redbubble site. So BodyServe branded mouse pads.
Well, Redbubble launched the mouse
Right,
pads.
but
They made them available.
You did the work between the two of us.
Okay.
I like to have a standalone mouse. I can't do the little trackpad or whatever, so I will be purchasing one for myself.
We need to... I mean, I have this mouse pad here. I collect frogs. It was a thing that happened when I first started college, I think, or maybe even slightly before college. And now everybody knows to just buy me frogs. I get frogs all the time. I just received a fanciful golf playing frog in the last couple weeks, who is just keeping watch over our living room. And this mouse pad is of a frog, and it is dirty. It is
old.
It's going on 20 years old. But it's still working. I think maybe it's time for an upgrade.
Yeah.
So if you, like us, still use mouse pads, you can go to redbubble.com, search the BodyServe, and you'll find mouse pads with 6 different designs on them.
All right. So let's wrap up. Thank you for listening. I'm James. I'm at ElliotJMR on Twitter.
2 L's, 2 T's. I'm Jonathan at tennis_John. We are at the BodyServe on Twitter, Instagram. Google us, download us, review us. Till next time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.